I created the perfect system for failure, taking detailed notes day after day after day and never once going back to review them. And the crazy part was, I had a delusion that every information I wrote down was being stored in my brain merely because I had written them down. But the truth is, our brains don't work the way we think they do. When you write something down, it is not automatically being stored in your long-term memory. Usually, your notes are an extension of or an external record of the information that your brain promptly forgets about. And that is why most of us end up filling our notebooks with brilliant insight that never make it up into our knowledge base. That was exactly my story. But why did I keep doing this? Why did I keep subjecting myself to this futile routine? It was fear, plain and simple. It was fear of missing out, the nagging worry that every word uttered by my lecturer or professor was a nugget of wisdom that I could not let slip through my fingers. Then, one day, it hit me. What if the very act of note-taking is sabotaging your memory? I didn't need to capture every detail. I just needed to be present in every lecture and capturing the very essence of the lecture. So I took a bold decision. I stopped taking notes. So I actually stopped taking notes in class. It was a very huge challenge that I decided to take on. But I was scared. So I didn't stop taking notes altogether. I decided to buy a notebook smaller than what I would usually take for classes. So in these notebooks, I would have smaller spaces. So I would be forced to not write everything down, only what was important. Otherwise, I would finish up my notebook so quickly and I had just little money for notebooks. So I started that for about a couple of weeks, and I found that, well, I was actually forcing my brain to filter out information and write down what was actually important. So after a few weeks, when I felt comfortable with writing in these smaller notebooks, I took the challenge a step further. So this time I went in for sticky notes. Sticky notes, very small, can be easily misplaced. If you take out a leaf and you don't stick it to something, it can get missing. So that forced me, I knew those notes were temporary, so that forced me to pay much more attention, filter out information, write only the salient ones. And over this period, I noticed something interesting. While I was dropping the rate at which I was taking notes, my attention, my focus were improving tremendously. And I was amazed. I was like, wow, the note taking that I used to think was really helpful, making me study, pay attention, do well in class, well, of which the results were not super amazing, just okay. After dropping these notes, I'm rather experiencing an increase in my attention and focus in class. I was amazed. So after a few weeks of getting comfortable with using the sticky notes, as expected, I took the challenge another step further. In fact, that was the final step. I decided to stop taking notes altogether. So I was not taking anything to class, no notes, I meant no pen. Just go with my phone and myself and my brain. So that was the real test. Going to class with no notes taking devices was wild. But again, after a week, 2 weeks, I noticed that I was getting comfortable staying in class and I was still able to pay attention. And I had gotten to the point where I trained myself to listen, filter out information, build a framework to keep the information, alright? And that was it. So eventually I stopped taking notes and I was still paying attention and doing well. Yes, so I achieved my goal of staying on top of my studies. right? But to be honest with you, this came with some significant challenges. The prominent one of them is the experience of cognitive overload. There were several times that I felt at a point my brain was just having too much to handle. And cognitive overload is basically having too much information for the brain to process at a time. Right? I felt that so many times during my lectures. But I would feel, well, I was completely new to this approach, right? Even though I had spent a few weeks getting comfortable, the moment I went completely noteless. It was huge. The impact was huge because I would feel comfortable writing a few things down, but then to have to not write anything, that was extreme. So I felt this moment of too much for my brain to handle, too much, too much, too much, and those times were like my brain could shut down for a while. I would lose focus and all that. But overall, yeah, I was experiencing this improvement in focus and attention during class. But I was concerned. I wanted to better the system that I was developing, and I've been a fan of self-sustaining systems. So I wanted something that was sustainable, right? So that led me into developing another approach, which I would call, or I used to call, paradigm shifts, or call it philosophies. So by paradigm shift or philosophies, basically mean having a way of thinking around a topic, right? So right before the lecture, or maybe the day before, I would have to get the lecture material, look at the lecture material, go through, build a framework or a way of thinking around the topic, right? Or the various concepts that are involved, right? Now, this saved me so much space in my brain to be able to take on every information that was coming, right? Put them in their right places in the framework that I had built. So that allowed me more space to be able to draw more meaningful connections between various concepts that were being discussed during the lecture. And this was a huge solution to the problem that I had faced earlier, the problem of cognitive overload. So I found myself now retaining the attention I was able to pay and even engaging more in the lectures, because then I got to ask questions. When I made connections, I got to ask questions, relating lectures, the lecture that I was present in, the concept in the lecture, relating the concept with concept in other lectures from before, or even other things that I had studied earlier. So now I was able to build a very solid understanding of the various lectures I was partaking in. Maybe to better understand this, you can think of building a car from the essential car components or car parts, as opposed to having to build a car from the very minor atoms that make up the car. It's definitely easier to have a framework to flesh your car on. And that's how I felt with building these frameworks before the lectures. So I could flesh on all these various concepts that were coming into it and then develop various meaningful connections. Also, along my noteless journey, I did some experimentation and came across a concept called Bloom's taxonomy, right? Bloom's taxonomy is a very huge topic that definitely deserves another video. So I won't be discussing it in detail, right? So this is just a summary. So Bloom's taxonomy is basically about this pyramidal structure that categorizes different levels of cognitive thinking in your learning. As you can see on the diagram on the screen, each level higher up adds on or built upon the preceding level, right? So you have the lowest level being about recalling random facts or information, while the highest rank is about synthesizing information to create new ideas or products, right? So if you're definitely aiming to be a professional in your field of skill or knowledge, you should be aiming for the creation rank. So what I began to do right from the class was to engage myself at the highest order of learning according to the Bloom's taxonomy. So right with the information I was getting from the lecture, I would start thinking about how to put them together, how to create ideas, to create products if possible. Alright. So just trying to keep myself higher up in the ranking of the orders of learning according to the Bloom's taxonomy. So this was amazing, and this was a very fun thing to do because I was not taking notes in the first place. And it was interesting to have to put ideas together, trying to build something. It was fun. You know how when you're trying to build something as a kid, it's always fun. It gives that feeling of, putting something together. And you get that sense of fulfillment that you're creating something, right? I would find myself linking ideas from different areas, and I really enjoyed it. Trust me. And best of all, practicing engaging your brain in the highest order of learning according to the Bloom's taxonomy will really help you come up with interesting, thought-provoking questions even during your lectures, which can go a long way to impress your lecturers, professors, and even earn you accolades that you probably wouldn't have gotten if you were taking notes. So there is no magic here. You're just trying to think like an expert. You may not get everything right all the time, but just the effort you're putting in will shine forth. And great professors or lecturers love to see you put in some effort, trying, asking questions during their lectures. So more on Bloom's taxonomy later. So that's basically it. We've come to the end of my story on how I went noteless in school, and I think this really works especially for programs that are required to read a lot of information, have to retain a lot of information, have to take a lot of notes. And obviously, most of us don't take notes, right? Now, let me put this right here. It's not like note taking is bad altogether, but I think the purpose for which we take notes have to be re-evaluated. I still do take notes, but not in lectures, right? I don't like to take notes in lectures. I take notes for other purposes, maybe brainstorming, and I'll get into all those things later in later videos. Well, if you've stayed with me all this while, I want to commend you for sticking here and pursuing some knowledge. I hope you've learned something from this video, and I hope that you'll try it and let me know when you do try it and then you get some feedback. Please put it in the comments, okay? Or even write up front what you think about it. If you think it will work, you can let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation in the comments. Till we meet again, it's a bye.